Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for Friday, August 10th, 2012. A look out at the tropics shows us several areas to talk about, but none of them poses any serious threat to land. TD7, if it can hold together, may bring some squally conditions, possible tropical storm conditions to parts of the Lesser Antilles here, but then I think it will die a quick death here in the eastern part of the Caribbean Sea, and I'll explain why in just a minute. Then we have 93L sitting off the African coast. That is Cape Verde right there, and this is the Cape Verde island chain, and it's between the two, and this will probably never amount to anything either. The leftovers of Florence, not even worth mentioning except what I just mentioned. Then Ernesto will actually be the bigger story. Ernesto technically no longer being issued advisories on by the Hurricane Center. It's going to move on into the Eastern Pacific, where a very rare thing will happen. It'll redevelop there, and it'll actually acquire the next name on the list for the Eastern Pacific, which is Hector, and I think it has a really good chance of doing that. And look at the satellite shot of the Atlantic Basin. There is Ernesto's leftovers. Pretty vigorous mid-level circulation, lots of moisture to work with, and the Eastern Pacific ripe for development. And it's amazing that this traveled all the way across the Atlantic, was able to form, survive the Caribbean, make landfall here, a second landfall in mainland Mexico, now heading for the Eastern Pacific, where it'll live for several more days. Quite a journey that Ernesto has undertaken. This is TD7 with a little effort of convection there, but I think the elongation of the whole system and the dry air that's around it, the shear that's going to be waiting for it here in the Caribbean going against it, that it's got a good chance of never making it past probably 70 degrees west longitude. You can also see on this satellite picture the dust that's out here, the dry air showing up very well as the dusty layer, the Saharan air layer, comes off of Africa, really putting the lid on things literally across much of the tropical Atlantic. If TD7 makes it, it could end up over here, very similar to where Ernesto was, but I just don't see it happening, and I'll explain why. Nevertheless, folks here, almost in the same spots that Ernesto went through, just a little bit farther north maybe, you might have to deal with tropical storm conditions. At the very least, even if it opens up into a wave before then, just a wave of low pressure, you have just a brief period of squally weather, but nothing any more serious than that. Definitely have an increase in sea surface temperatures along its path, but I don't think that's going to matter with all that heat content ahead of it. It really, if you have too much dry air, which is all this coloration in here, way too much dry air at the mid-levels, these tropical cyclones just can't survive. They struggle so hard to push the clouds up to get that mechanism going, but the thermodynamics of the atmosphere don't allow it. It's the same type of process that when you have a big pot of pasta or macaroni and cheese boiling and it's about to get real frothy, and you take a paper plate and you wave it and blow some air into it, it collapses all those bubbles. Same kind of thing in the tropics here. Dry air will really sap the ability of convection, that upward motion of the atmosphere, to take place, and there is plenty of dry air to go around here in the tropical Atlantic. That might change, you would think, over the coming weeks, but right now, a very negative pattern. If we look at the GFS output for the next 5 days, this is valid tomorrow morning. Here's the east coast of the U.S. over here. There's Florida, around the Gulf Coast, Central America, and South America. Here's the west coast of Africa. This is 93L, showing up as basically nothing. This is TD7, showing up as a sharp little trough of low pressure, but not a solid tropical cyclone. I mean, if you just look at this map, you'd say, nope, nothing to worry about on there, and that is pretty much the way of it. 48 hours out, this is valid Sunday morning. This would be TD7, but I think it'll be dissipated by then and opened up into a wave of low pressure. This is the little bit of energy associated with 93L now. And it's interesting because just a few days ago, these same models were indicating that this could end up coming all the way across and maybe running up the east coast, Some of the ensemble members of the GFS were putting it into Florida as a powerful hurricane. Occasionally it ended up in the Gulf. Then it just kind of like switched tunes real quick and said, oh, wait a minute, conditions out here are negative, and so this is just going to stay really weak. It's just amazing how it's truly still unpredictable as to what will happen in the long term, especially. I know a lot of people try to look out into the future and see, and it just sometimes doesn't go the way you think it's going to, and the models can be of help, but they are certainly not perfect. Out at day 3 here, back on Monday morning, return to the work week. I don't see TD7 anywhere in the Caribbean here, not at the surface. Probably still has a reflection up at the 5,000 foot level, but at the surface it's practically non-existent. Lingering low pressure in and around the area where Ernesto made its last landfall. At this point it'll be in the eastern Pacific, probably as Tropical Storm Hector. This is 93L, just a very faint area of showers and thunderstorms. Day 4, very quiet out there, just an elongated area of low pressure off of Africa, but no named systems that I see. I wouldn't look at this map and say that there's a tropical cyclone anywhere on it, and the same holds true for day 5, August the 15th. Now, this is typically when, 8/15, we start to look for development to really ramp up in any year. August the 15th is what most people regard as the beginning of the meat of the hurricane season. It's about that time period through maybe late October, but certainly mid-October, that 60-day time frame that is the busiest part of the hurricane season, and I'll take a much closer look at that on Monday when we look at climatology and what to expect for the week ahead. One thing that we can look at in the week ahead, and we'll examine throughout the weekend as well with this video blog, this is the leftovers of Ernesto. It's probably going to get to develop here in the East Pacific, and a lot of the modeling does indicate that it could come up here and eventually impact the Baja. We'll have to see how that works out. An amazing journey that it took from Africa, as I mentioned, all the way across to impact the Yucatan and then mainland Mexico, now getting into the Eastern Pacific. Gilma out here, not a worry at all, but we'll really watch Ernesto closely. I'll post frequent blogs in the hurricanetrack.com blog, which will also show up, of course, in your app, and then I'll do this video blog once a day throughout the weekend to keep you posted along the way. Alright, so good news that nothing's really threatening land of any serious consequence. A wonderful bit of news for coastal dwellers, I'm sure. Not exciting for people who like to track hurricanes, but I think people would rather have it be a landfall-free time period than anything else. You'd probably agree with that. Have yourselves a good weekend. Like I mentioned, I will keep you posted through the blog and this video blog tomorrow and Sunday. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth, hurricanetrack.com. Thank you for watching. I'll keep you posted over the next couple of days.